Good evening, I'm Amna Nawaz.
And I'm Jeff Bennett. On the NewsHour tonight, Gazans welcome the ceasefire deal with cautious optimism, knowing a lasting peace is still far from certain.
I'm scared because the Israelis still haven't retreated, and even though there is a ceasefire, nothing has changed yet.
In the midst of the devastation from the LA wildfires, a glimmer of hope. Residents are banding together to help one another in their time of need.
And Secretary of the Interior Deb Haaland on the Biden administration's efforts to preserve public land and tackle climate change.
There is so much that could never be undone because the work is getting completed. Our clean energy transition, moving forward.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by
Cunard is a proud supporter of public television. On a voyage with Cunard, the world awaits. A world of flavor, diverse destinations, and immersive experiences. A world of leisure and British style. All with Cunard's White Star service.
Carnegie Corporation of New York, working to reduce political polarization through philanthropic support for education, democracy, and peace. More information at carnegie.org. And with the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the NewsHour. Israel's cabinet has delayed a vote until tomorrow on the ceasefire deal struck yesterday to suspend the war in Gaza and swap hostages and detainees.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu blamed Hamas for the delay, saying the militant group was trying to change the deal, a charge Hamas has denied. In the meantime, American and Egyptian mediators met in Cairo to discuss implementing the deal, which is scheduled to begin on Sunday. Nick Schifrin once again begins our coverage.
Today, in the blown-out destruction of what was once home to 500,000 people, where children play in the ruins of what used to be Khan Yunis homes, there is tension between the horror caused by 468 days of war and hope that it will soon be over, as young Gazans told us, 14-year-old Ragad al-Asadoui.
We couldn't wait to hear this news because our hearts are tired. We really couldn't wait for something to heal our hearts. Finally, the end of the war is coming.
16-year-old Ahmed al-Nabahin.
The most difficult moment was hearing that my father had been killed. I'm scared because the Israelis still haven't retreated, and even though there is a ceasefire, nothing has changed yet.
Because in this war zone, the war rages on. In Gaza City today, the youngest victims received reassurance that the adults can no longer feel.
Is this the truce they are talking about? What did this young girl, this child, do to deserve this? Is she fighting you, Israel? Where are the Arabs? Where are the Muslims? No one has any conscience.
Israel says over the last day and a half it struck more than 50 Hamas military sites and a commander who participated in the October 7th attacks. Palestinian health officials say since the ceasefire was announced, more than 75 Gazans have been killed.
We urge the mediators who brokered this truce to hurry up. Today is better than tomorrow. 7 is better than 8, because there are martyrs every hour.
But the deal that would pause the war for 6 weeks is not done, said Israeli government spokesman David Mencer.
That Hamas have reneged on this hostage release agreement and has created a last-minute crisis in an effort to extort last-minute concessions.
But in Washington, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said he remained confident.
It's not exactly surprising that in a process and a negotiation that has been this challenging and this fraught, you may get a loose end. We're tying up that loose end as we speak. Please, sir, respect the process. Thank you.
Oh, respect the process. Respect this process while everybody...
But Blinken was interrupted by two protests, including one ended by armed security.
You need to respect the process. Criminal, why aren't you in The Hague?
There were also protests today in Israel. Supporters of hard-right politicians called the ceasefire a surrender to Hamas that would end up killing Israelis. National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir vowed to resign from the coalition government.
The existing deal increases Hamas's appetite and motivation. This deal is letting them attack, explode, and kidnap and get what they want.
But the families of Israeli hostages held in Gaza are demanding the government sign the deal. They're anxious. Officially, at least 1/3 of the hostages are dead. Many do not know whether to plan a celebration or funeral. Tal Haimi has been a hostage since October the 7th. Udi Goren is his cousin.
The vast difference between the daily anxiousness about might this be their last day on earth to the fact that some of these people by next week might have their loved ones sleeping in the bedroom next to them.
Until then, they pray for peace. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Nick Schifrin.
Today, more of President-elect Donald Trump's picks for key cabinet positions faced questions from senators on Capitol Hill in another mammoth day of confirmation hearings. Our Lisa Desjardins has been covering these all, and she joins me now with the latest. Another busy day, Lisa.
Yes.
Let's start with the nominee for Treasury Secretary. What do we need to know about him and how he sees the office?
Scott Bessent is actually someone who's very well known in high finance, famous even, and he has a distinct resume. So let's talk about it. He used to work as a top executive for George Soros. He was a Democrat at times. He's a hedge fund founder, but he has more recently been a Donald Trump mega donor. He is openly gay, Amna, and that would be historic because if confirmed, he would be the first Republican cabinet secretary to be confirmed by the U.S. Senate. Now, a major focus in this hearing was, of course, taxes, which he would oversee tax policy, and the 2017 tax cuts by Donald Trump, which would end at the end of this year. Tax rates would go up for most of us and for businesses as well. He said that this would be cataclysmic for the economy, but Democrats say tax cuts should only be kept in place for those making under $400,000. Otherwise, they say it's a giveaway to the wealthy. He disagrees, as you can hear in this exchange.
Do you agree that ending the tax cuts for those making more than $400,000 would help close the deficit and reduce our national debt?
Senator Warnock, I do not. I believe that you would capture an inordinate amount of small business people.
What about $1 billion?
So, I think that these are the job creators.
So it's a real debate over who would benefit here. Another big topic, tariffs, as we've been focusing on as an organization. He defended Trump's tariff push as something that is sound and can be used in multiple ways. But Democratic Senator Ron Wyden said, no, this is something that would hurt average Americans, people who can afford it the least. So I want to play their exchange.
It's going to be paid for by workers and small businesses. So your response?
Yes, Senator, I would respectfully disagree. Foreign manufacturers, especially China, which is trying to export their way out of their current economic malaise, they will continue cutting prices to maintain market share.
Okay. That's an academic view of it. But what I know is the history of this is it clobbers people of modest means.
This is a critical debate, not just for this country, but for the world, depending on how Trump moves forward with tariffs. Overall, though, Bessent was very measured throughout, and there really is a feeling that he's on a glide path to confirmation. Let's
turn from the Treasury now to the top environmental officer. The man nominated to lead the EPA also faced senators. Tell us about that.
Right. All right. We're talking about Lee Zeldin. He's someone who's a former congressman from New York and ran for governor, lost that race, but he's generally seen as someone who's a little bit more moderate. He has been a very strong Trump supporter. Here, we're talking about a situation where Trump has made it clear that he wants to actually dismantle the EPA and roll back some protections that Democrats feel are important. Zeldin has said he is more pro-energy as well. He was asked about that idea of dismantling the EPA today. He said he professed ignorance over that concept, which we know Trump has talked about. Didn't really answer those questions. But he was really more held to account for his own past words on climate. We know the Environmental Protection Agency key and what is pollution, what is affecting the climate. In 2016, he said this. He said that the U.S. must move away from fossil fuels and pursue green energy. So I want to play an exchange where he was asked about those words and where he is on those today. They pressed him on that.
I said, do you believe it's imperative that we, using your words, reduce our reliance on fossil fuels? Do you still believe that?
In considering all factors, in an ideal world, we would be able to pursue always the cleanest, greenest energy sources possible.
Well, I'm not hearing you say that you agree with Lee Zeldin in 2016.
So we have to really watch him on the job and see, is he now a different person regarding climate? Overall, he did question whether some pollutants are pollutants, and we're going to track that as well.
This is another key figure in energy and environment. Also took questions from senators today. What stood out to you from North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, who's nominated to be Interior Secretary?
Our viewers know from your reporting, too, Doug Burgum, the governor of North Dakota, presidential candidate. Now, he is also an energy expert. One thing that stood out, Amna, is what he was not asked about. I'm going to get to that in a second. He talked about drilling. He talked about saying he's open to all forms of energy. Now, this hearing, though, comes at an important time. One day after Donald Trump put this out on Truth Social about energy, he wrote that he does not want any windmills built during his time in office. He wants that to stop. Burgum was asked about this, and he said he does want to prioritize fuel that is fossil fuel. That's something that renewable fuel people need to pay a lot of attention to. Now, what was he not asked about? His potential conflicts. He also is a multimillionaire, and he is not divesting from everything, but that didn't come up. It's just another sign that he's on a glide path. This was not contentious. Democrats are accepting that his fate is pretty much accompli.
Well, another piece of news in the Republican Party I want to ask you about, a rare move by the Speaker of the House to oust a chairman, in this case from the Intelligence Committee. What do we know about this?
So stunning. Mike Turner, the Republican former chairman of the Intelligence Committee, someone very pro-NATO, also pro some intelligence maneuvers like the FISA program, which is used to gain intelligence. Now, he was asked to leave. He's been pushed out by Speaker Mike Johnson. Turner said to CBS that he was told Mar-a-Lago is involved, that this was something to do with Trump. Johnson has denied that. But there is real concern. There is split concern over whether this is Trump trying to sort of change the intelligence community to his benefit. Others say no. Turner was not a good chairman. He kind of didn't tell some colleagues earlier last year when he made a big statement about threats, and he wasn't popular. So we're still gonna, there's another thing. I keep saying this, but we're gonna have to watch it very closely.
We'll watch very closely indeed. Lisa Desjardins, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And we start the day's other headlines in space. Amazon founder Jeff Bezos and his company Blue Origin sent their first rocket into orbit after scrubbing an initial attempt earlier this week. Liftoff. The successful test flight of the uncrewed New Glenn rocket is a major step in the company's hopes to challenge Elon Musk's SpaceX. Meantime, astronaut Suni Williams got to venture outside the International Space Station for the first time today to carry out repairs. She's one of the 2 astronauts who've been stuck aboard the ISS for about 7 months longer than planned. Williams and Butch Wilmore are now due to return to Earth in March or early April. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis today appointed State Attorney General Ashley Moody to the U.S. Senate, setting her up to fill the seat of Senator Marco Rubio, whom President-elect Donald Trump tapped to be Secretary of State.
Our Attorney General and your next United States Senator, Ashley Moody.
The 49-year-old was first elected as the state's AG in 2018. She'll be only the second woman to ever represent Florida in the U.S. Senate. Rudy Giuliani has reached a settlement with the two former Georgia election workers he defamed. The former New York mayor and Trump advisor will get to keep his homes and other personal belongings. In return, Giuliani will pay an unspecified amount to Ruby Freeman and her daughter, Shaye Moss. He also promised to never defame them again. The settlement came on the day Giuliani was due to testify in a trial over his assets. At issue was whether he would surrender his Florida home and 3 World Series rings as part of the $148 million judgment against him. There's news today in the nation's fight against cancer. According to the American Cancer Society, the mortality rate dropped by 34% from the early 1990s to 2022, preventing millions of deaths. But younger adults and women are getting cancer more often, with rates for women under 65 now higher than men. Racial disparities also persist. Blacks and Native Americans are dying of some cancers at double the rate of white Americans. Today's report predicts that more than 2 million new cancer cases will emerge this year, and hundreds of thousands of Americans will die from the disease. Federal health officials authorized the sale of Zyn nicotine pouches today. The FDA says it found that the products contain fewer harmful ingredients than cigarettes and other types of chewing tobacco. As such, they can help smokers cut back or even quit cigarettes. It's the first time regulators have authorized the sales of such products, which are the fastest growing segment of the tobacco market. Turning now to South Korea, where a court rejected a petition today to release impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol from detention. Yoon is reportedly refusing to cooperate with authorities as they try to question him over his declaration of martial law last month. They're trying to determine whether his actions amount to rebellion. Investigators are expected to move to formally arrest Yoon in the coming days. Meantime, South Korea's Constitutional Court held a second round of hearings in Yoon's impeachment trial today. The court will ultimately decide whether he can stay in office. On Wall Street today, stocks cooled off a bit after yesterday's sharp gains. The Dow Jones Industrial Average lost nearly 70 points. The Nasdaq dropped about 170 points on the day. The S&P 500 also ended in negative territory. And the man known as Mr. Baseball, Bob Uecker, has died.
The Brewers win! The Brewers are moving on!
Uecker was the unmistakable voice of his hometown Milwaukee Brewers. Before that, he was a major leaguer with underwhelming stats but undeniable charisma, who won a World Series with the St. Louis Cardinals in 1964.
Vaughn into the windup in his first offering. Just a bit outside. He tried the corner and missed.
When he wasn't calling games, Uecker's comedic wit landed him in the movies and on late night. He appeared on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson more than 100 times. He earned honors from the Baseball Hall of Fame in 2003 for his lasting impact on the game. Bob Uecker had battled lung cancer since 2023. He was 90 years old. Also, David Lynch, a visionary filmmaker who found mainstream success, has died. His work was known for its dark and surreal sensibility.
You will want to turn away from him.
Filmmaker and director David Lynch startled audiences by marrying mundane, everyday life with unsettling dreams, fantasy, and horror.
She's dead.
Perhaps his most famous work was the 1990 TV series Twin Peaks, which he co-created with Mark Frost. The mystery horror drama follows an FBI agent who travels to a seemingly normal logging town to solve a murder. He quickly realizes nothing is as it seems. Twin Peaks was a groundbreaking drama that was influential for years to come, winning 3 Golden Globes, 2 Emmys, and even a Grammy for its theme music. Lynch revived it decades later with a follow-up series on Showtime in 2017. Lynch rose to fame in the 1970s with his film Eraserhead, a cult classic horror about a deranged father and his mutant reptilian baby.
One name that keeps coming up is this woman Singer.
Other hits included the crime mystery Blue Velvet that featured Laura Dern, Kyle MacLachlan, Isabella Rossellini, and revitalized the career of Dennis Hopper. It earned Lynch an Oscar nomination for directing. He was nominated as well for The Elephant Man in Mulholland Drive.
What's wrong? I just don't know who I am.
When the lights go down and the curtain opens, we get to go into another world, and it's very beautiful.
Lynch famously never discussed the meaning of his films, but he described in a 2007 interview what inspired the surrealist style that made him so famous.
I love a story that holds abstractions and gets a thing that cinema can do, saying abstractions. So those things they're kind of like the same feeling we have when we have a powerful dream.
In all, Lynch directed 10 feature films. He was also a prolific artist and painter, and created some of the attention-grabbing sound design and music in his work. His cause of death has not been disclosed. David Lynch was 78 years old. Still to come on the NewsHour, TikTok prepares to be banned in the U.S., and the outgoing U.S. ambassador to China discusses the future of the bilateral relationship.
This is the PBS NewsHour from the David M. Rubenstein Studio at WETA in Washington, and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
With calmer winds, fire crews are making progress on containing some of the major fires around the Los Angeles area. But dry conditions and forecasts of strong winds next week suggest more dangerous conditions ahead for weary Angelenos and firefighters. New video shows the depth and scope of the fire devastation along the Malibu coast. More than 80,000 people remain evacuated, and some are growing frustrated they can't return to check on their homes. Local authorities said today that residents may not be able to do so for at least another week.
There are areas that we are holding because we believe there may be deceased victims there. We have to hold for the right time and the right resources to process the scene correctly. And that's going to take a little while.
So far, at least 25 people are dead and dozens still missing. While the fires have brought vast destruction and loss, we've also witnessed the best of humanity. Californians stepping up to help their neighbors in any way they can. We spoke to many of those people working around the clock to help those affected. Here is some of what they told us.
My name is Brittany Thorne, and I'm the Executive Director for Best Friends Animal Society in Los Angeles. The last week has all felt pretty chaotic from when we first saw the flames from the roof of our building. We have been going out to any of the local shelters that are being impacted by these awful fires. That would be the LA County shelters, LA Animal Services, as well as, of course, Pasadena Humane. And we have been pulling in animals that were already in their standing population. So these are not animals that are currently being displaced by the fires, but we know that those animals are coming in. And so we wanted to create as much space as possible in the shelters. If we are able to get animals out on a flight to our sanctuary in Utah, and then from there, they will be sent to other rescue organizations as well.
My name is Victor Dominguez, and I am the president and CEO for the YMCA of Metropolitan Los Angeles. Almost immediately, we started 15 distribution sites across the county of Los Angeles. We have engaged more than 20,000 volunteers in less than a week. We opened up all of our facilities free of charge so that if anyone needed to take a shower, anyone needed family time, anyone needed well-being time, that they had access to any of my 27 YMCAs across the county.
My name is Jackie Fila, and I'm the president and CEO of the Hotel Association of Los Angeles. We wanted to make sure people understood, number one, rooms were available, and we also wanted to have kind of a one-stop shop so they weren't calling around and trying to figure out what was available in the area they wanted to be, in the type of accommodation they wanted to be. Me and my mighty team of one other person, Veronica, we wanted to create this document with access to what are legitimate special offers being offered at the hotels. Our goal was to centralize as much information about accommodation as quickly as possible and to push it out to folks.
My name is Faraz Ayad, and along with Eric Armstrong, we are the founders and operators of No Res Gourmet. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, and our mission is to address hunger in the United States. We cook meals and we distribute to those in need. So this is a similar idea, but obviously on a much larger scale, which required the activation of as many people as possible. Many people made those $25 donations, which supported a lot of the expenses for the groceries and things we needed. There's forms for people to request supplies and food. We had to track volunteers, who's doing what, and then it was multiple locations. This church that we're talking from right now, Grace Church of Glendora, where the main kitchen is operating. There's another kitchen in Gardena, and we're kind of overseeing all of that.
My name is Andrew Gruhl. I'm the owner and chef at Calico Restaurant with my wife, Lauren Gruhl. I think it was the Wednesday or Thursday. And I said, anybody who needs a place to stay just for a temporary period of time, come down. We've got 80 parking spots in our restaurant. And then when Lauren put out that call to action on the donations, it's funny because we're like, oh, it's going to be 2 boxes worth. And fast forward, like 12 to 24 hours later, we had 3 full Amazon trucks full of products that immediately got delivered. We had volunteers on every part of the political spectrum, people dressed in MAGA gear, and then people who were dressed in like the opposing gear, all coming together, helping each other out, loading trucks up. Like it's just the greatest feeling.
And we've had kids, as young as 6 to individuals in their 70s coming to volunteer. So it's really everybody is coming together to help.
The clock is ticking on a potential ban of the popular social media app TikTok. In April, Congress and President Biden gave the app's Beijing-based parent company 270 days to find a new owner or face a shutdown, arguing Chinese control of the platform was a national security threat. The U.S. Supreme Court is right now considering a challenge to the law, but barring any last-minute changes, users will no longer be able to download TikTok starting on Sunday. For his part, President-elect Trump has pledged to provide some kind of reprieve from the ban. His national security advisor, Mike Walls, reiterated that on Fox today.
We will put measures in place to keep TikTok from going dark. In the legislation allows for an extension as long as a viable deal is on the table. And then, essentially that buys President Trump time to keep TikTok going.
We're joined now by Carrie Cordero. She's a senior fellow at the Center for a New American Security. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So with this January 19th deadline just days away, it appears members of the incoming Trump administration and bipartisan members of Congress are trying to buy themselves more time. What are the possible outcomes?
Well, the law that they passed last spring doesn't leave a lot of options. What they really needed, what was in the law, was a credible buyer lined up and a willingness on behalf of TikTok to actually be sold to that buyer. There's nothing out there right now that looks that circumstance really occurs. So the cleanest way for them to give more time for President-elect Trump once he comes into office would actually be between now and Sunday, Congress passing a new law extending the timeline. That seems pretty unlikely.
And the president-elect Donald Trump, he at one time supported this ban. Now he doesn't. What accounts for that?
Well, it's hard to say what changed his mind. One thing we can look to is his and his campaign's use of TikTok during the campaign. This law was passed last spring. Obviously, over the course of the campaign between then and November, his campaign found that TikTok was useful to them. Other candidates used it as well. And so perhaps that's what changed his mind. Perhaps also it was lobbying efforts on behalf of TikTok or other content users or other stakeholders.
What's particular about the case that the Supreme Court is about to rule on? And how might that affect things?
Well, so that would totally change things depending on which way the court rules. Based on their oral arguments last week, the indications from the questions that the justices were asking are that the court intends to uphold the law. In other words, keep the divestment ruling in place, and eventually, if there's no buyer in the next few days, that the app would not be as available as it currently is. I think there is a legal path for the court to have ruled on First Amendment grounds and to actually rule in favor in TikTok. But again, the argument did not indicate that that's the direction the court's going.
As we mentioned, the government sees TikTok as a national security threat. What's the precedent, though, for the federal government banning a social media app?
So I think this case really is novel. The precedent for the government is the fact that this law was crafted as divestment. And there is a history of the United States using divestment when there is foreign ownership of a company to mitigate national security threats. What's different about this case is that it is about access to information. Over 170 million Americans use TikTok, and this law is different because it governs the information space and it applies this divestment to a source of information and a place that Americans communicate both as individuals and as businesses.
In the meantime, people are now downloading and signing up for this other Chinese-owned app called RedNote. Tell us about that and the potential dangers there.
Well, so what happens is that another foreign-owned, in this case Chinese as well, app becomes available. And so it's not a good outcome of this law that it is actually driving users to another Chinese-controlled or Chinese-influenced app. So that's a downside, and that's why I think really in the long term, although the government made very compelling national security arguments, backed up by classified information they provided to Congress, not backed up by much unclassified information provided for the public. But although the government alleges very strong national security concerns, in this case, my assessment is that the law is sort of short-sighted because it deals with this particular situation and it doesn't really account for the fact that there could be some other foreign-controlled app down the road, and then how do you handle that?
If this ban goes into effect, what might an average user see starting on Sunday?
Well, there really is a big question mark because we haven't been in this situation before. The law itself applies not actually to TikTok. The law applies to the companies that provide access to it. So the way it is expected to be implemented is that the app would no longer be available through app stores, for example, for people to download following the 19th of January. There also would not be further updates to the app. So basically, new users wouldn't be able to access it if the companies do in fact restrict that access, and it would become more buggy. It would not have new content necessarily, and so there would be sort of a degradation over time.
Carrie Cordero, thanks as always for your insights. We appreciate it.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thanks, Carrie. Returning now to the fragile Gaza ceasefire deal, the agreement announced yesterday largely mirrors a proposal made by President Biden last May. In recent days, President-elect Trump's Middle East envoy joined the Biden team in Qatar in a bid to push the deal to completion. For more insight, we turn now to White House Principal Deputy National Security Advisor Jon Finer. Thanks for being with us. And John, we understand there had been a last-minute holdup in implementing this agreement. Israel blamed Hamas for reneging on part of the deal, which that terrorist organization denies. Is the U.S. confident that both sides will be able to put this deal in place come Sunday?
So, look, I wouldn't call it a holdup at all. I think things are continuing to move forward with the implementation of the deal that the president and the mediators announced yesterday. This was always going to be complicated to implement. There are a lot of moving pieces. There's a lot of complexity to the arrangement. There is zero trust, literally, between the two sides. But our understanding is that now all of the relevant documents for the deal have been fully approved. The Israeli government will begin its formal approval process tomorrow. We expect that to proceed over the course of 24, 48 hours, and then the deal to begin being implemented as soon as Sunday or soon thereafter. But everything remains on track at this point.
Secretary of State Tony Blinken today, he praised President-elect Donald Trump's incoming special envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, for his work with the outgoing Biden team on this deal. To what degree was the overall Trump factor key to clinching this agreement, namely the social media post from Donald Trump last month where he warned of hell to pay in the Middle East if the hostages weren't released by his inauguration?
Well, look, President Biden's diplomatic team was in the principal chair driving this deal forward. The president himself announced the broad contours of the deal as far back as May. All of those elements were present in the deal that actually was agreed yesterday, and the president's special envoy for the Middle East, Brett McGurk, was in the region for almost 2 consecutive weeks straight, working through the fine print with the Qatari and Egyptian mediators and shuttling between the two sides. That said, I think the Trump administration played a very important supporting role. They said the right things about the need for this deal to get done, pressed both sides as we were, and so we welcomed that participation. And ultimately, this was about the outcome, which is getting the hostages home, getting humanitarian assistance into Gaza, and bringing an end to the fighting, much more than it was about who gets the credit.
Well, on that point, once the fighting stops, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza persists. What's the plan? What's the mechanism to surge badly needed food, water, and medical assistance into Gaza to those people who so desperately need it?
So we have been preparing with the United Nations, World Food Program, other NGOs that provide humanitarian assistance to get ready to fully implement the terms of the deal, which involves 600 trucks a day of assistance surging into Gaza the minute the fighting stops. And we fully expect the humanitarian community to be ready to do that. And that's a very important part of getting things right on the implementation side. Obviously, implementation is going to extend well into the new administration. This is 6 or 7 weeks in the first phase of the deal. And so we are going to set the table for a successful implementation. It will be up to the new administration, the incoming team, to carry that forward.
Big picture question here, because critics on the right have argued that the Biden administration really handcuffed Israel in terms of criticizing its tactics, it's sometimes withholding weapons, and those on the left say that the Biden White House really enabled Israel to act with impunity in Gaza. Looking back now, would the administration have done anything differently?
Well, looking back now, what I see is a strategic environment in the Middle East in which the United States and its key ally, Israel, as well as its other partners in the region, are stronger than they were before October 7th. Their interests are better secured and safer than they were before October 7th, in large part because of the collaboration between the United States and Israel. When Iran sought to strike Israel twice with hundreds of ballistic missiles, it was the United States and a coalition of partners that helped the Israeli Defense Forces defend the country from those attacks. When Israel decimated Hezbollah, it was the United States that backed Israel's willingness and efforts to do that. When Assad, the president of Syria, fell and fled the country, it was the United States' efforts with Israel that weakened Iran and weakened Russia, Assad's 2 main backers, that prevented them from being able to come to his rescue. So Hamas, I think, looked across the region, saw all of its friends and partners in a fundamentally weaker place, and felt like it needed to make a deal. Now, I will not deny that this came at an enormous humanitarian cost. This is something that we have been acutely sensitive to and that we have pressed in every day, in every conversation that we have had with Israeli officials, to increase the amount of humanitarian assistance going into Gaza. And that is, in many ways, the most important part of this deal, in addition to getting the hostages home, is that there will be a significant increase in relief to people in Gaza who badly need it.
Why didn't President Biden push Netanyahu harder or more publicly to curtail the IDF operations and lessen the civilian costs in Gaza?
So, I mean, to be honest, the thing that was holding back the stoppage of the violence and the halting of the fighting was that there was a deal on the table that the president announced as far back as May, the details of which were continually refined over the course of the summer, that Israel accepted and Hamas didn't. A number of months have now gone by. Hamas has gotten to a place where it's under enough pressure that it was willing to actually accept the terms of the deal, with some very minor adjustments and alterations that took place over the course of those weeks and months. But the holding point, the sticking point, very much so in recent days and weeks, was Hamas's unwillingness to take the deal. Once they did take the deal, we were off to the races, and now it is time to actually get the formal agreement to the Israeli government, which we expect over the next day or two, and then to begin implementing, which will provide significant relief.
Question about Sudan, because today, for the first time, the U.S. sanctioned the head of the Sudanese armed forces, and there are reports out today that Sudan's military used chemical weapons on at least 2 occasions against a paramilitary group it's battling for control of that country. How will the U.S. respond?
Well, so the United States has now imposed significant sanctions on both sides of this conflict. The Rapid Security Forces, Rapid Support Forces have been sanctioned by the United States and actually designated by the State Department for perpetrating genocide in parts of Sudan. Today, the United States imposed sanctions, as you said, on the Sudanese armed forces for their role in atrocities. What we've got right now is the most acute humanitarian catastrophe anywhere on the planet as a result of this civil war, but you've got two sides who, as of now, do not seem to be interested in stopping the fighting. So the United States is putting pressure on both sides and is trying as hard as we can, along with our partners, to surge humanitarian assistance into Sudan to get some relief to the people. But until either side, one or both, decides they're interested in actually stopping this war, it is going to be very challenging to get the fighting under control.
John Feiner, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
For 4 years, the Biden administration has said there's only one country that has both the intention and capacity to reshape the international order in its favor. That country is China. Nick Schifrin is back now and talks to the man who's had a front row seat and helped manage U.S.-China relations.
Amna, that man is Nicholas Burns, who has been the Biden administration's ambassador to China since 2022 and joins me now. Nick Burns, welcome back to the program.
Thanks so much.
The incoming Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, said this about China in his confirmation hearing yesterday.
The Communist Party of China is the most potent and dangerous near-peer adversary this nation has ever confronted. They have elements that the Soviet Union never possessed. They are a technological adversary and competitor, an industrial competitor, an economic competitor, a geopolitical competitor, a scientific competitor. If we stay on the road we're on right now, in less than 10 years, virtually everything that matters to us in life will depend on whether China will allow us to have it or not.
Industrial competitor, economic competitor, geopolitical competitor. If we stay on the road right now, less than 10 years, virtually everything that matters to us in life will depend on whether China will allow us to have it or not. Do you agree?
I agree that we're in a major competition with China. We're structural rivals. We're rivals for military power in the Indo-Pacific, and we can't afford to be number 2. We're rivals technologically. Who's going to be first mover in AI and machine learning and quantum computing and biotech? We've got major problems on the economic side because China's not playing by the rules. And we have, as you know, Nick, substantial differences in our belief in human freedom and their belief in not giving rights to their own people. So I agree there's a competition. But the United States has strengthened its position in the Indo-Pacific over the last 4 years. And we've done it because we've strengthened our alliance with Japan, with the Philippines, with the Republic of Korea, with Australia. We've invented the AUKUS arrangement, which is going to be a transformative national security, military boon to us in the next couple of decades. So I think we're stronger, and the Chinese have begun to make mistakes, so I don't think there's anything inevitable about China overtaking the United States in global power. I would bet they won't in the next 10 years if we're strong, and if we also keep in touch with them and work with them on some of the global issues that are important, like climate change.
So as you say, the main part of the U.S. strategy has been to expand the alliances in the region, whether that's gaining access to bases, some of which are close in the Philippines, Japan, some of which are close to Taiwan, improving relations with and between Japan, South Korea, Philippines, Australia, as you said, AUKUS, nuclear submarines, and yet China's aggressive behavior, whether around Taiwan, whether toward the Philippines, whether hacking into the United States telecommunications grid or critical infrastructure has continued. So does that mean that U.S. policy has failed to change Chinese behavior?
I don't think so in some respects. You mentioned South China Sea. The Chinese have tried to intimidate the Filipinos over the past year, especially this past summer. The United States stood up to China. We have a 1951 mutual defense treaty with the Philippines, and we told the Chinese time and again, if you use physical force, military force, which they did not do against the Philippines, you're going to draw us into that. And I think we deterred them. We've also built up the military capacity of Taiwan. through arms transfers, and as you said, Japan and the Philippines much more focused on that problem as well. And you've now seen the European countries begin to act strategically in opposition to what China's trying to do, because China, of course, has been the major ally of Russia in the Ukraine war. So I think the Chinese have miscalculated on some of this. Have we resolved every problem with China? No. I spent 3 years trying to do that. But the suggestion that somehow the United States is going to be overtaken in power by China in the next 10 years, I don't see it happening.
Let's bring us to Taiwan. President Lai Ching-te of Taiwan says that the island doesn't have to declare independence from mainland China. Quote, "We are already independent." Is that semantics or is that provocative to Beijing?
Well, it depends who's listening to it and who's commenting to it. I think it was provocative in some ways to the Chinese authorities, but we've told the Chinese, you need to commit, this is the mainland Chinese, you need to commit to a peaceful resolution of this dispute. And there are a lot of countries that want to make sure that Taiwan has a deterrent, and 50% of global container traffic flows through the Taiwan Strait on a monthly basis.
You've simultaneously had to also restrain William Lai, the president of Taiwan, not to go farther than he already has, right?
Well, the United States has been clear, we do not support Taiwan independence. And what's remarkable about the Taiwan policy, Nick, is since 1972, there's been a consistent policy that has worked and has kept the peace by every administration of both parties. So I think we did well to send the right signals on Taiwan.
China faces significant economic headwinds. The number of PLA, Chinese military officers fired for corruption seems to suggest that Xi Jinping is worried about corruption. Do you believe that Xi Jinping's confidence is waning about the Chinese military's ability to be able to invade or blockade Taiwan by 2027?
It has to be part of the calculation, the problem they've got in thinking about a major, if this is one option for them, a major cross-strait operation. He fired and put on trial for corruption the two commanders of the rocket forces, and more recently in the last 30 days, the senior admiral in the Chinese Navy. You know, when Xi Jinping came in 12 years ago, he launched an anti-corruption campaign. And there was this feeling that somehow this was going to be just the opening salvo. It's been permanent. And there have been hundreds of thousands of Chinese officials put behind bars.
Is his confidence waning, do you think?
You know, it's hard to know personally what he thinks, although we have spent a lot of time with him, and President Biden did in Lima 2 months ago, excuse me. But they've got to be concerned by a military that has never done a combined forces operation of this type. So we just need to continue to be steady in leading the rest of the world to advise the Chinese. You can't use force. There'd be a huge price to pay for that in terms of China's reputation. And of course, we're going to continue arming Taiwan.
Finally, quickly, President-elect Trump has refused to rule out military or economic coercion on Greenland and Panama. Perhaps it's rhetoric, but how does Beijing hear that talk? And just in about 30 seconds we have left, how does it affect the U.S. arguments about Taiwan?
Well, basically, the message to Putin and Xi Jinping, you can't take over someone else's country, you can't cross borders by the use of force. So it sends the wrong signal to Xi Jinping. And Nick, I was ambassador to NATO. On 9/11, the first country that came to support us was Canada. Denmark supported us. These are great allies of the United States, and we Americans built a world order on sovereignty, inviolability of countries' borders, and respect your allies. The biggest difference between the United States and China right now, China has no allies. We have the NATO allies and the East Asian allies. So that's the difference maker, and we should respect the sovereignty of our allied countries.
Nick Burns, the outgoing U.S. ambassador to China, thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick.
One of the legacies President Biden leaves behind when he exits the White House is his record on conserving and protecting the country's public lands and water. Deb Haaland, Biden's Secretary of the Interior, played a key role in implementing his policies over the last 4 years, and I spoke with her earlier this week. Secretary Haaland, welcome to the NewsHour. It's great to have you here in person.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
So, as the very first Native person ever to serve as Cabinet Secretary, United States history. We should point out you were leading a department that once worked to remove Indigenous people from their land. And I know a lot has been written about how you wanted to use this role to really examine and grapple with history here in America. A big part of this was the work you did looking into the actual work governments did to separate Indigenous children from their families, put them into boarding schools, strip them of their history and language and culture. When President Biden issued an apology for these actions, what was that moment like for you? What stays with you?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, that was absolutely an historic moment. And sitting in the crowd, listening to the president with my fellow Indigenous friends and relatives around me, it was very profound. Now, we finished that second report for the boarding school initiative, and we put a list of recommendations. And no sooner did we get that out and over to the White House that the White House called us and said the president wants to make an apology. So he immediately felt the need to be out there and following our recommendations. So we were all very pleased. And of course, it's important because, as I always say, Native American history is American history. And we all need to, as Americans, we all need to heal from these tragic moments in our history. And so the healing part of what we have done, we hope is what really comes of all of the work that we accomplished on this issue.
I know the transition process has begun. You've had conversations, I assume, with your nominated successor, Doug Burgum. Has this issue come up?
So I haven't actually had any conversations with the incoming secretary, although I do want to point out that the mission of the Department of the Interior does not change. It's the same mission throughout history that we were dedicated to. So we can hope that the 65,000 career staff who remain at the department, even though I'm leaving, will move so many of the issues that we found important enough to work on forward.
The mission may not change, but I think it's fair to say it is being redefined with the way the incoming administration has laid it out. Doug Burgum is said to be taking on a much more expansive role, much more energy focused as well. He's going to have a seat on the National Security Council. How concerned are you that a lot of the work you've done on climate, on preservation of public lands, that could be undone?
So there is a lot that can never be undone. President Biden's Investing in America agenda that essentially moved $45 billion to our nation's Indian tribes for climate resilience, for landscape restoration, for infrastructure. All of those things are in process and they're getting done. Billions of dollars went to cleaning up legacy pollution sites across the country, and that work has also been ongoing. There is so much that could never be undone because the work is getting completed. Our clean energy transition, moving forward, President Biden asked for a 30 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2030. We're more than halfway there in less than half the time. So we have really moved the needle on a clean energy transition, on legacy pollution, on Indian country. And so we feel good about the opportunities that remain for all of those sectors.
This moment of transition, I need to ask you to look back slightly because in the past you have called Mr. Trump a threat to democracy. You did cite his election as your inspiration to run for office in the very first place. It was in 2018 that you and Kansas Congresswoman Sharice Davids made history as the first Native American women elected to Congress ever. I have to ask you, now that he's won and he's about to be sworn in for his next term, what is this moment like for you?
So, of course, when I first got to the Department of the Interior, it was very exciting. 4 years seemed like a really long time to get so much of our agenda completed. Now, with just a few days left, of course, I'm feeling a little sad to leave my colleagues, but I know that we worked so hard and we got a tremendous amount accomplished. I have to believe that our best days are ahead of us. And you know, administrations come and go. The voices of the American people who want to conserve these beautiful natural resources that we have, those voices will continue. Yes, I am always going to be involved, and I feel confident that that my voice was important in this administration, and it'll be important in the future as well.
What's ahead for you? What's next?
I'm going to go back to New Mexico. Looking forward to some enchiladas with red chili, quite frankly. You know, we have an amazing group of political appointees that my colleagues that I served with at the department, we're all sort of spreading out to do some amazing things. And so I look forward to staying in touch with all of them and absolutely advocating for the things we know we need for our planet.
Deb Haaland, outgoing Secretary of the Interior. Madam Secretary, thank you so much for being here. And that is the NewsHour for tonight. I'm Amna Nawaz.
And I'm Jeff Bennett. For all of us here at the PBS NewsHour, thanks for spending part of your evening
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by
On an American Cruise Line's journey along the Columbia and Snake Rivers, travelers retrace the route forged by Lewis and Clark more than 200 years ago. American Cruise Line's fleet of modern riverboats travel through American landscapes to historic landmarks, where you can experience local customs and cuisine. American Cruise Lines, proud sponsor of PBS NewsHour.
the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions, and friends of the NewsHour, including Leonard and Norma Chlorfine and the Judy and Peter Bloom Kovler Foundation. The Ford Foundation, working with visionaries on the front lines of social change worldwide. And with the ongoing support of these institutions. And friends of the NewsHour. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
You're watching PBS.